are learning in chapter 45 the idea of compassion. What is compassion exactly? We'll get to that in a moment. But we learned yesterday that a straight path that we can have is to have compassion over ourselves, over our divine soul that is literally comes from the highest realm in the divine, and it comes down into this very coarse world, very negative place, negative being, that we're discombobulated because we're going in all different directions. Why are we going in different directions? Because we don't see a oneness, we don't see a unity, we don't sense the presence of anything transcendent. And therefore we're driven in so many different directions. That's what Klippa does. It covers over the hidden divine truth. And it's hard to feel a flow of oneness in your life. And therefore we're disconnected. That's where the soul comes into. For that alone, we should have compassion. And all the more so, by the way, compassion is on our soul, on our divine soul, that it's imprisoned. But even more so is then afterwards, because of the nature of this world, that drives us in so many different directions, and we don't feel a oneness in soul, a oneness in connection to the divine, to God. Then that brings us to negative thoughts. It brings us to behavior that's not appropriate. So therefore, we should have compassion on that. Even more so, we're affecting the divine, the Shekhinah, the divine presence of God. The metaphor of the rope on top is connected to the rope on the bottom. When you schlep the rope on the bottom, what's on top comes down. What's on top? Well, the source of our soul in the Shekhinah, the divine presence of God, the soul and the source of the soul, which is again the divine presence. In other words, we're actually affecting God in a negative way when we do things that are inappropriate, which we're going to have more of a discussion about that because that's a phenomenal idea. Now, with this, we can understand Yaakov Avinu, Jacob, our forefather. He secured for us in all generations an abundance of divine compassion that we should be able to elicit the divine compassion for ourselves and for the divine, and that we can do it in every generation. He started the whole process. You know what happened? Well, if you remember the story, he took the blessings that were rightfully his, but through trickery, took the blessings that Esau thought that belonged to him, and so did his father actually, Isaac, Yitzchak, and he had to leave town. As a result, his brother was in a rage, so he had to leave town, and he's going to Lavan. He's going to find himself a wife, and before he settles down, he meets Rachel, by the well. And what does he do? Right away, he sees, in the incident with the rock that's coming over on the well, he kisses her. So a simple meaning is he's a prophet. He knows that she's meant for him, and he kisses her and actually cries, because he sees in prophetic vision that they won't be buried together. They're going to live together, but not be buried together. So he cries. And that's a simple meaning. Well, there's more to that. But the deeper, more mystical meaning, the Alter Rebbe explains like this, that Jacob kisses Rachel, he lifts up his voice and weeps. So this is a metaphor. More than just a metaphor. They're an embodiment of something more than themselves. Yaakov is an embodiment of compassion. Compassion, as it is a reflection of his soul, because just like Abraham was an embodiment of loving kindness in his being, Yitzchak was the embodiment of power of Gvura, inner strength, refrain. Yaakov is the embodiment of compassion. Compassion as it is in the world of Atzilus, the world of emanation, which is compassion, but it is a limited form of compassion. Rachel, on the other hand, she's the embodiment of all of the souls of the Jewish people. In a sense, she's the ultimate mother. She's the ultimate mother. Because what's the ultimate mother? A mother has self-sacrifice. She sacrificed. Why did she sacrifice? She dies on the way, and she's buried in Bethlehem. She isn't buried with Jacob. She isn't buried with the rest of the forefathers and foremothers. We're all buried in Hebron, in the cave of the Machpelah. Why? Because she is the ultimate mother. What's the ultimate mother? Sacrifice, who is there for her children. When the children go into exile, they all pass by her gravesite. She comes out and cries in great pain for the suffering that the Jewish people now have gone through, the destruction of the Holy Temple, being exiled from Israel, and she is there for them as the ultimate mother. So she embodies all of the souls of the Jewish people. That's who she is, the community of Israel, the font of all souls as they are above. She is the embodiment of that. So what is Jacob doing? He's the embodiment of compassion. He lifts up his voice. He lifts up his level of compassion the way it's in the world of Tzilus, which is a limited form of compassion, and lifts it up to the source of all compassion. That is an infinite form of compassion that is found with God, and is eliciting that infinite form of compassion from above upon Rachel, the souls, who she's the embodiment of all of the souls of the Jewish people, from the beginning of time till the end of time. And that's what he is doing. He's calling out the Father of all mercies, the 13 divine attributes, that they should be showered upon the entirety of the Jewish people. And that's right, that therefore, that in order to awaken and to draw upon them this boundless divine mercies, compassion on all the souls of the Jewish people, that when our souls will come into this world, which will be a descent, which that soul then comes into a body, and it's an exile for the soul in the sense that the soul, the divine soul, is now under the dictates of the animal soul in the body until we release it from there, right? That it should now have a highest level of union and bond with God, which is called a kiss. The divine kiss. So he gives her a kiss, which is a reflection of the divine kiss that God will kiss us and we will kiss him. What is involved in a kiss? What is the metaphor of a kiss? Is two things: two lips coming together and an exchange of breath, shall we say. Meaning two lips come together, but they're together, but they don't exchange, right? Your lips remain yours. But there's an exchange of breath. So what does that mean? It means now we're studying Torah. I am, in this moment, as we all are, engaged in a divine kiss. That God has such compassion upon us that he brings to us, that in our learning we can have this kiss with him, this union and oneness with God. So again, kiss means two lips coming together. My lips are saying the lips of God's Torah. So when I'm saying the words of Tanya, these are the words of God. So my lips are joined with God's lips. Furthermore, the divine wisdom and the divine will of God now becomes a part of me, becomes my wisdom. and becomes my will. That's the exchange of breath, or his breath is imbued and becomes a part within me, meaning I have the divine will and wisdom that is now, because I'm understanding it with my thought. So speech, I'm saying the words, that's the lips, but then there is the breath of God that is now imbued within me. How so? Because I'm thinking the words, understanding the words, integrating, and the words are becoming a part of me, meaning the divine wisdom of God and his divine will are becoming a part of me. That's a divine kiss. That's the breath. And that's what it means. My spirit cleaves in the spirit of God. Because his spirit, which the word spirit is ruach, ruach means wind, air, is now becoming a part of me. That part of God is becoming a part of me. And this is what Yaakov, Jacob, our forefather, was affecting for us, some 4,000 years ago, that we can, what's the word? Meditate and think about how we're learning Torah right now, and we're having this divine kiss that from the when I think about the compassion that God that we need to have upon our soul that's in exile, that can't needs to be released. How's it released? Right now through our learning, or anytime we do a mitzvah. So the learning is a divine kiss. When you do a mitzvah, giving charity in particular, or about any physical act of a mitzvah, it's a royal embrace. God's right arm, as it were, embraces right arm, left arm too, a royal embrace when we do an act of loving kindness, which God's right arm is the divine kindness. It embraces us. And when we are aroused this deep compassion for our soul, we arouse this deep compassion for our soul. In other words, our soul is in a body that is contained, imprisoned, isn't connected. But now when I have compassion upon it, and it leads me to study Torah as we're doing now, or to perform a mitzvah, then I'm able to attain through that compassion that I have a great love of God in the consciousness of our mind, and even able to bring it to our heart in a palpable way. And this concludes the chapter. The Alter Rebbe says this is the idea that Jacob redeems Abraham. Yaakov redeems Avraham. Why? Avraham is the embodiment of love. Yaakov is compassion, as we just said. Compassion redeems love, meaning not always can we love God. Not always do we love another person. But take it from a human condition. There are people in our lives that we should love, but we don't. For whatever reason. Or in the moment, we don't. You know how you can get there to love them? Have compassion for them. If you think about them in a compassionate way, it will redeem the love. And you'll be able to have that bond of a great love for them. It's the same thing as with God. We don't always have the capacity to have a love for God. We need to redeem that love. The love is part of my soul. My soul desires it, but again, where the soul is in a body. So when I meditate about the fact of my soul, that it came from such a lofty place in the oneness of God above, it came into this physical body, which God did. It's not a blame to anybody here, but it's a reality. And I have compassion of the soul, not compassion not compassion. I'm a weak person, so I have compassion on my weakness. No. That's not a healthy form of compassion. Don't have compassion for your weakness. Have an understanding of it and work on it. By having compassion of your situation. What is your situation? Your situation is that God took your soul, he didn't ask you, and put it into a body down here, and it becomes very removed from anything divine. When I have a compassion on that human condition that God created, and furthermore, because of that human condition he created, I've faltered. I've done things in thought, speech, and action, my human behavior that is not so I. So when I think about that, and I have a compassion upon my soul, so that will arouse me to want to extricate it from its imprisonment. How? Only by doing a mitzvah, only by studying Torah. So when that will lead me to do that, then that compassion will ultimately lead me to a bond, a love of God. As compassion redeems and brings out the love, as we just explained. It's an amazing idea. And in human relations, this is so key. There are so often it happens in our lives, and we have to be honest with ourselves. We don't always love the people we should be loving. Sometimes it's hard because they're not so lovable. You can love them in theory, but I'm talking about that you really sense a love for them now. Not necessarily. But you should. So you need to redeem the love. If you can have compassion, if you think about, the fact that that person is acting nasty, the person not really being nice, definitely not lovable, and you would even question, I shouldn't love that person at all. Oh yeah, but it's your wife, it's your husband, it's your child, it's your parents, it's your cousin, whatever, it's your best friend. So, yeah, you should. Okay, it's understandable that you can't get there maybe right now. But if you will understand their situation and appreciate the situation, that part of it is just like my soul coming into my body was not my doing. So that God created, so creates in people's lives. And when you understand that, they don't have all of the wherewithal. God didn't give this person the wherewithal, and to be such a, refined individual. So when you appreciate that, okay, and then that person took it to the next degree of, unrefinement and coarseness, from inappropriate behavior, from nature. They nurtured it in a negative way. They nurtured in a negative way. Then when you appreciate that, then you can have compassion on that person. From that compassion, you can come to even love them. That's a very powerful tool to be able to use in our lives, and something that we need to think about and how we can indeed use it in our lives, in human relations. It begins by okay. It begins with our relationship with God, and our relationship with our own divine soul. When we can do that for ourselves, then we'll be able to do that, and for the divine above, the Shekhinah, the divine presence of God that we affect. When we can do it there, then we'll be able to do it in human relationships also. And that is a very powerful tool. So, we've got a bunch of people here and a bunch of questions. Just give Addie in just a moment. Give me just a moment here. I need to get my bearings straight. Give me a moment. Okay. So I just need to go through some before I lose these questions. Veronica is asking, why did she feel less than Yaakov? Rachel felt less than Yaakov. I don't know why that needs to be understood that way. Not at all. She didn't feel less than Yaakov. I'm not certain why you would say that, Veronica. Maybe you have to please elaborate. What did Yaakov see or feel when he saw Leah? He saw that she was meant for Esav, not for him. That's what he saw. In the end, God had a different plan. That's what he saw. Didn't Aaron and Moshe ask Hashem for a divine kiss when they were ready to leave this world? That's a divine kiss of death. This is not a divine kiss of life. We're talking about here a divine kiss of life. That's different. A different idea. Okay, Daisy, please put question marks because I don't see it. Okay. Is there the same embrace when we get from Hashem when we are in a sukkah? Similar, yes. That's a complete embrace. Very good. Denise, wasn't Yaakov the embodiment of Avram, and Yitzhak is one? They're a continuation, but they each one have their own uniqueness. Okay. How does compassion relate to focused intent? Well, if you have compassion towards to your soul and to the effect of upon the divine, so that's the intent. That is intent. Adi, please share with us.
Hi, so I have really bad internet right now.
Okay.
But
so far so good.
Yeah, I've been listening so far and I'm really enjoying everything. It's been useful. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Thank you for sharing. Anybody else here on Clubhouse that would like to share? Vilma, Batya, Jennifer, Sina, Mendel, Dawn, Sussy, Anastasia, Marcy, Ezra. Go ahead. Sorry, Vilma.
So this compassion that you're saying that we have for other people, that comes from the compassion we have for ourselves and from our love of God, what does it lead to for other people? Like, what I'm gathering is that it's not just a feeling of compassion, because compassion by definition is more than that.
It leads to a different kind of behavior when you have it. Like, as I mentioned, there are people in our lives that maybe we don't have, that we don't feel love towards, and there are people in our lives that we should have love towards them. Maybe we just, we love them, but they're not. I don't feel love towards them now because this person's maybe acting in a way that's not lovable, right? So compassion will be able to redeem that love, and therefore you're going to act differently. Go ahead.
Yeah, so the behavior will be better, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, ultimately, and thank you, Adi, Vilma. Yes, ultimately, it's about our behavior. Feelings are about bringing us to action, to speech, and to thoughts and appropriate thoughts. So ultimately, for it to be a true, valid feeling, the fact that you feel something, you feel it. But if it's not bringing you to an appropriate action, then you got to question where that feeling's coming from. It's not coming from a good place. Not coming from a good place. If it's not improving your behavior of thought, speech, and action. If the feeling is improving your behavior, then that's the point of the feeling. The feelings are not an end in themselves. In Western civilization, I've said this before and I say it again, we make feelings as a god. We serve our feelings. This is what I'm feeling. This is how I feel. I feel,
Well,
and therefore we make it into, you know, and we have to be careful with that. Yes,
I
Vilma.
think I think some people like will be driven by their feelings in a like positive or negative way, like towards them or away from them. So there's both cases, right, where people move by are moved to do something by their feelings or moved not to do something because they're moving away from their feelings, so they're doing something, to avoid the sitting with the feeling. So feelings aren't, positive or negative. They just are. They're just telling us something from our senses. But people don't like sitting with their feelings. They don't like figuring out what their feelings mean. And that's a lot of good information that our feelings can tell us, and then we can respond, um, you know, better if we just kind of try and figure them out.
So, correct, we need to be able to discern and appreciate and understand the feelings. That's true. But then we need to know, where's it coming from. If it's coming from my animal soul has feelings, right? My godly soul also has feelings. So the feelings of you know, being upset, the feelings of negative feelings are coming from a negative place. So and the fact is, to prove for ourselves if it's coming from a negative place, is that feeling leading me to do something good, another mitzvah. So if it's a feeling of compassion, so that's going to lead me to give more charity. Let's say, for example, by way of example, it's going to lead me to do act of loving kindness to someone who maybe if I didn't have that feeling of compassion, I wouldn't do it. So that's leading me to something positive. If you know, if I'm having a compassion over, for example, ah, I blew it again. I such a fool I am, da da da. And you have compassion over your, don't be so tough on yourself. And so where's that leading? That don't you don't mend what needs to be mended. You don't fix what needs to be fixed. So that means that compassion that you're having in that moment for your lack is not coming from a good place because it's not leading to any behavioral action that is positive. So, so no, feelings are either a positive feeling or a negative feeling, depending of where it's coming from, and that's why we need to be aware. So it's not neutral. It's neutral in the sense, Vilma, I said maybe this is it's neutral in the sense that it's the 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 mid ground of what you're experiencing, and how you will translate that will be the testament. In that sense, it's true. It's not this or that. How am I going to translate it? So you can feel a negative feeling towards somebody, but if you remain with that negativity and it brings now to a behavior that's negative, so then that didn't come from a good place. But if it was a negative feeling, but then we turned it around and it brought me to a healthier way to respond to this person, then that's what we're talking about. That I hope shed some light.
Yeah, that's wonderful because the awareness of ourselves and how we feel is so important. Like our own awareness.
Yeah.
It's very important.
Absolutely. Um, Absolutely. Okay, 1 second. Daisy, you're going to have to re-ask your question because I don't see it. Veronica, I understand that when she saw Yaakov, she hid from him because she felt he was above her. No, she didn't hide. Not to my reading. I know now that it's always wonderful when we can share and bring the teachings in your own words, and Eugenia does that. She says, I know now that compassion for my soul has an impact on my conduct, while compassion for others enables me to feel towards people around me whoever's behavior does not make them lovable. Okay. Denise, Davida, Yaakov married both Rachel and Leah. Was there any difference in the compassion he met for each of them as his wife? I don't know. Good question. Don't have an answer. Sorry. Daisy, okay. Hashem put our divine soul in this world because by doing mitzvahs we are becoming, I'm not certain about that. Hugs, maybe? So why should we feel compassion for our soul if we and our surrounding become higher and make this world a place for Hashem to live and to be comfortable, to live comfortably? Because when you will have compassion upon your soul, then you will want to redeem it. You'll want to redeem it from its imprisonment when you have compassion. How? By studying Torah. So that's your intent, to study Torah, to redeem your soul and to connect to God with the divine kiss, as we explained. And so that's what it means. Deborah, can compassion be equal to forgiveness? Forgiveness is separate from compassion. Compassion will lead you to be forgiving, absolutely. But I don't think it's equal. It's another process in, after having compassion, you'll be able to be forgiving. But very good, excellent point. Elise says, I have often two feelings and I feel a clash, which often leaves me feeling stuck in the middle. Well, if you're having compassion, then that will overcome, because compassion is extremely powerful. Tessa, what can one do for a budding teenager that is mostly uninterested in her family's Judaism? It feels like I'm losing her. What can a mother do? Oh, that's an amazing, good question. Have compassion and be very loving. Have compassion for her situation, what she's going through, and the more you will be loving and not demanding from her, because someone who's a therey're coming into their own space, their own independence. They want to feel independent, and therefore the healthiest thing to do is just to shower them with love, with Ahavas Yisrael. Just love them, and just live, not demanding from them. That's as a general statement. There's always specifics to every situation, which would be difficult to deal with that now. Dawn, please share. Dawn.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
You mentioned compassion and forgiveness, and that compassion leads to forgiveness. Can forgiveness lead to compassion? Can you forgive before compassion?
For sure. For sure you could. It won't be as easy. It'll be difficult. Now, if you're forgiving and you still have a palpable feeling of love towards that person, so then you don't need the compassion to be bonded with them and to be forgiving, because the lovingness in the relationship that is still palpable by you will then bring you to be forgiving. So if that's there, then you don't need the compassion in order to be forgiving. But often what happens when someone hurts you, the lovingness that you feel towards that person might be very much on the back burner and may not be palpable, and is not palpable and not real in a sense of a feeling, and therefore to be forgiving, like you might do it out of sort of like in a forced manner rather than in a in a complete way. So through the love or the compassion, it's going to be much more complete and much more real. It'll be difficult for it. It'll be sort of almost like, oh, I know I should be forgiving. Okay, so I'm forgiving, but it's lacking the emotive force that's going to make it a true forgiveness. Does that resonates, Dawn?
Yes, thank you.
You're very welcome.
I have a question now, Rabbi.
Sure, Adi, go ahead.
Okay, so is this the same? Like, can you forgive or can you have compassion towards someone who was extremely abusive to the extent like that you suffered trauma or that you're dealing with trauma? And I ask this because also yesterday I was on a Kabbalah and mysticism chat with another rabbi and a few other teachers, and they were in one point of the conversation, which was very long, they had mentioned something like this, that in order to heal and like kind of evolve, you had to recognize that the journey was for you. So kind of like not taking anything personal. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you for sharing that. Thank you very much for the vulnerability that you always share. That's something remarkable, I must tell you. So definitely, if you really believe, if we truly believe in God, then what that means that everything that comes my way was meant for me. And if it was meant for me, as difficult and as traumatic it might have been at the time, the more I understand that it was meant for me, even though I may not understand why. Forget about why it was meant for me. Maybe we won't get that. But if we have the belief that it was meant for me, so that means I have to use this as a tool to grow from it. Now, growing doesn't mean it's not painful. But the trauma is really when you see this as being bad. If this is bad, then this is traumatic. If it's really bad, then it's really traumatic. But if this is meant for me, and even though it's painful, I didn't give it I didn't qualify it as being bad. Painful, hurtful, yes, but from pain you could grow immensely. So it was meant for me. Why is not even the question. I mean, the why you would say is then, on one level is, to grow from it. When you can accept that, then the trauma has been reduced remarkably. Remarkably. Again, it's not taking away the pain. It's not taking away the hurt. That is still there, can be there, but it will definitely be reduced, and the negative impact will be reduced as a result, and I'll be able to grow from it. And yes, that's ultimately what it came to me for, that I could ultimately grow from it. Does that resonate?
Yes, thank you so much. I'm glad that I could still be here for that last answer. Now I have to go.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. That was it's easy to say on this side of the coin, right? That when you're not experiencing it, and when the person's experiencing it, we need to have compassion for them and empathy, feeling their pain, but at the same time, and often what happens is people like to be there's a nature of some of us that we sometimes like to be the victim of something, and wallow in victimhood. There is a part of us that likes that, because then I can point the finger at someone else and they got to change. And rather than pointing a finger at me, that I have to deal with this in a way that it changes me for the better. Um, Now that's, it's easy for me to say it on this side of the, of not being a victim of something, but we're learning now, and when we're learning, we need to speak the truth as it is. When a person has gone through a traumatic experience and they're taking it very badly, and they see it very badly, and therefore it becomes, so it's a tricky thing. They're not ready to learn at that moment. It's not a it's not a learning session then, if you're involved in that person's life, to you know to teach them this, in particular if they're not open to it. If they are open to it, and you can help them through this, and they are open to kind of grow and to learn, then wow, that's an amazing, beautiful soul. When this is what they're going through. Oi, okay, there's a couple questions over here that I need to. Ben, if you show, by the way, a reminder that if you're asking a question, 2 question marks first, and then ask your question so I know it's a question. If you show compassion and forgiveness and the same people continue hurting you for control or feeling inadequate next to your compassion, what can you do? What can you do as this compounds trauma? Oh, good question, Ben. An excellent question. We should not act in any way because we want a consequence of our actions in another person. That's not honest, and that's not real, and that is a mild form of manipulation. I'm acting this way in order that I should get this result out of you, right? And we do that. We all do that. We all do that, and that's a tough thing that we should be aware of, right? So the fact that you're acting compassionate, in an appropriate, let's say it's appropriate. So if it's not getting the desired result, um, that itself is, you need to act that way because that's the right thing for you to do. So we need to act the way we need to act because it's the right thing for me to do. How that will play itself out and how a person will respond to that, that's not something in my control. Now, maybe from that I'll learn that next time I'll, modify the way I'm acting because I've learned something about that person and how I need to relate to them. Yes. But it's not about, I need to act the way I need to act because this is the appropriate thing. This is what God needs from me. God needs for me to be da 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 right now, whatever it is, right? And that can always and will always change in based on how things evolve. I hope that answers somewhat, Ben. It's not complete, but it's a general understanding. Denise, how can one have compassion on someone who caused them physical or mental trauma? Is it about have compassion on the sinner and not the sin? Well, why can't you have compassion to someone who's done something terrible to you? I'm not clear why you can't have compassion. It may be difficult, and of course the more we feel the trauma of it, the more difficult it'll be for us to have the compassion. But if we have the compassion, then the trauma will be reduced as a result of that. Go ahead, Vilma.
So you're totally right, but letting go of pain and not holding on to grudges and all that, that's a process, like an internal process that takes time for people. And there's no like definite period of time. People could hold on to things for like ever if they wanted to. So the process of letting go and just being, forgiving and compassionate and all that, that's a choice that like we make as individuals. And we can make it, but feeling pain too, like once you stop feeling the intensity of that pain, then you can move on to process more and more of what you're saying. Like, so when somebody's going through something like what you said, we're just, we can't say that. We can't say all these things that you're saying because they're not going to be able to understand and hear it.
Exactly. Right. They're not ready for it. They're going through it. That's why when we study it, we could speak in these sort of in these terms and understand it in its objective truth, and hopefully that it seeps into our heart that when we do have a challenge, that we'll be able to yeah, in fact, truly be able to be compassionate at that moment. And again, that will help with the trauma that we're experiencing. And maybe we won't even call it trauma because we have compassion to that individual. That compassion to that individual doesn't mean compassion for the evil that they've done. It's compassion to a person, not to their actions. So as over here, remember that there was a two-part element over here in the compassion. There's a compassion over what God did in creating a situation for me. What's that situation? He took us, a divine soul that is totally in a blissful, peaceful, beautiful place above, right, in the divine order of things. And he put it into my body over here, and it has to contend now with, with a body that is imprisoning and not allowing it to have that peaceful, blissful attachment to the divine. So God created that situation. So the first thing in compassion is recognizing that God creates a certain situation in our lives, right? That is something we don't have control. Now, in that situation, maybe we added insult to injury, so to speak. And what the insult was that in our behavior of thought, speech, and action, we kind of, took it south. And we made things worse. So when we have compassion over the fact of the situation that is out of our hands, and then the things that we did to make things even worse, and we recognize that the compassion is not on the fact I made things worse. The compassion is on what I made things worse for. My soul that wants that peaceful, blissful, divine connection. And, it's now trapped. And I have compassion on that. So same thing now, let's take that for human relations. If I could see the other person who did something nasty to me, and something that, physical, mental abuse. Now, can I have compassion for them? Yeah, because what's their situation? That God didn't give them a refined quality of character, and they don't have that. They don't understand. They're narcissists. That's the way God made them in a sense. They have made it worse in their behavior. They added fuel to the fire. That narcissist nature that they have. I know them from when they're a little kid and they were that way, and now as an adult they're also that way. So that when you can understand that, oh, that's something to have pity on. That look what they got to struggle with. Look what the kind of character that they have. Such a lack of refinement in quality of soul. And then they were, they were hanging out with, with people that are even worse than them, and then brought them further down. And because of that, look at the kind of ills that they've done, even against me. So you can have compassion, not for what they did, but for them. Then what that will do is what they did to you, it will lessen the blow. It's still painful, can still hurt, but you're not going to feel the trauma of it as acutely. And especially if you're bringing into consideration what we mentioned earlier, when you really believe that everything is divinely orchestrated. For some reason, this had to come my way because I have to grow from this. When you add that to the dimension, then it's much easier to have compassion for them. Again, you don't have to become necessarily their best friends, because if We have people that are close to us who are this way. Compassion doesn't mean you bring them into your inner circle, and you are very close with them. It doesn't mean you have to do that. We're just talking about the attitude or the mindset, the mind frame that you have towards them, and even in your heart. If that resonates, does that bring clarity? Denise and Ben and everybody else that's joining us over here, Rabbi Israel. Oh, Shalom Aleichem. Thank you for joining.
So I have come to the conclusion that in retrospect, after looking at events, we can have the mindset of compassion and looking at things from the perspective that, if it was meant for us, then it was something that God wanted us to grow from.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Absolutely. Batya is asking, how does one try to resolve within themselves when one feels that the trauma is from Hashem rather than another person? That's the trauma is from Hashem. I don't know what that means philosophically. Emotionally, I can get that. Excuse me. That's my spring allergies that have sprung. Philosophically, I don't understand how you could say trauma from Hashem. Hashem is all good, so everything is good that's from God. Painful, I understand. Pain. Yes, that I get. I guess.
What I meant by
Go ahead, Batya.
the pain is what I meant. I mean, from experiences, for sure we know that Hashem does all things for the good. Understanding that and then having the pain, those are two separate things. So I just was, I guess, trying to ask a question, not just in regards to myself, but others who have felt trauma as a result of experiences we've had to experience, and how to make resolve with that, because it can be very challenging.
Totally. Very challenging. Again, just a reminder, we're dealing with this, outside of the realm of the experience of trauma in the moment. So we could speak about it philosophically, we could speak about it in absolute truthful terms, absolutely. But when it comes to living through something that is, very, very challenging and very painful, obviously, as we mentioned previously, we have to be careful how we deal with someone else. Not lecturing them then, or teaching them when they're going through this, their difficulty, unless they're very open to it and looking for it. And even for ourselves, it's a process, and we have to work on that. But I guess if the beginning point, if we can somehow muster up enough power and presence of our soul, of our mind, that that this is meant for me. So now try to seek, how am I going to grow from this? I think that would be what I would say is the first thing to do when we're experiencing for ourselves. Obviously, this was meant for me. This was an agent that God sent. The person chose to do evil. That was their choice, but it still was meant for me. I'm going to take this, as painful as it is something that I need to grow from. That is a very powerful statement, so one that you need to be very assertive in that moment that is painful. And if we're very assertive, and this is a gvura moment, of strength, inner power, inner strength, of refrain, right? Gvura is refrain. What's the refrain? I'm refraining of making myself the victim. I'm refraining myself of seeing the, seeing myself as that victim. That's takes a lot of courage and takes a lot of inner strength to do that. But we have that capacity.
I've heard of this being discussed in terms of things happen to us because we're human. We're going to experience, pain. Pain is inevitable as a part of our experience. However, just because we were victimized and we felt pain doesn't mean that we have to remain in that state of victimhood. That's not where we should remain.
Right, exactly. Thank you. Yes, totally. Robert says, compassion on evil? No, you're not having compassion on the evil. Absolutely not. But on the perpetrator of that evil, you can have compassion. Not on the evil, on the perpetrator, not the perpetrator of for their evil, but the perpetrator as a person, right? And as I explained earlier at great length, that idea. Daisy, can we feel compassion for let's not go into a Nazi over here. No, Nazi is not someone to have compassion over. Let's deal with loved ones. A Nazi is not what we're talking about over here. We're talking about your own spouse. We're talking about your own children. Talking about your cousin. Talking about your parents. You're talking about your good friends. Let's begin in that area. If we can master this in that area, because that's where we get the greatest pain from. We get the greatest love in the same place where we get the greatest pain. So if we can master it there and we can deal with it there appropriately, then we'll get to others, beyond that. I hope that. So, we're not talking about the Nazi here at all. Let's leave the Nazis and all those kind of things out from the equation. Marcy had a question or something to share.
Well, I had a comment, and I guess since you just said we're leaving the Nazis and all those people out, maybe I shouldn't make it. But we just got through with Passover and at the Seder, we spill our wine when we talk about the 10 plagues and the other plagues that were visited on Egypt, and that is part of having compassion. That's one of the ways that we learn that we're supposed to have compassion even for our enemies. But again, we're not. It doesn't change what we do. Like, it doesn't change how we speak about the Egyptians. We still speak about the fact that they were oppressive and horrible, even though we show compassion for their pain.
Right. Thank you for sharing that. Yes. And again, just to put this in proper context, all of that stuff is very far removed from us. And what is close at hand is our loved ones in our lives. And that's really where we need to begin with. Those things that, I've never been in the same room as a Nazi, to my knowledge. I never had a conversation with a Nazi. So, it's not, but there are people that I love, and sometimes they're not so lovable, and I gotta have compassion. Yeah. So I think if we begin there, we're going to be dealing with things in a good and a healthy way, and from there we'll take it to the next level thereafter. David, how can a person have compassion on oneself, being so hard on oneself, trying to do better but repeat the same actions? Have compassion not on the fact that you failed. Have compassion on your divine soul that just wants to connect and be connected and not to be disconnected. That it wants not even beyond success. Success is a temporal, limited thing. Connection to the divine is an infinite quality. So that's the compassion is on the depth of the beautiful soul that I have. So the compassion is like, yeah, I failed. I have a beautiful soul. I have a remarkable, beautiful soul. My failures don't. My failures don't really tell the full story of who I am. I have a beautiful soul, and I have compassion over it, that it is stuck, and I want to extricate it. So I'm working on extricating it, that beautiful soul I have. That's the notion, the way you can kind of phrase it. It might be meaningful. Spanish Jewess, Sarah, can you own insecurities get in the way of being compassionate at the moment towards someone when things trigger you? Absolutely. Very well said, Sarah. Yes, our own insecurities are what's going to hold us back from being able to be compassionate for another individual. Yeah, very true and very real. All right, folks, I must conclude today's class now. And we will continue. We're going to continue with a new chapter tomorrow, a new idea. Beautiful idea. More to come. Stay tuned. I'm Rabbi Ronnie Fine, coming to you from Chabad Zichron Kadesh in Montreal, Canada. It's a privilege and a pleasure to share with you, Tanya. Thank you all for joining in the conversation, whether it's on Facebook, Instagram, on Clubhouse. It's wonderful to have everybody and to make this into an amazing journey all together. Vilma, go ahead.
Thank you for this discussion, Rabbi. We'll see you again tomorrow, 8:30 a.m.
9:30.
9:30 Eastern Standard Time. And,
Mountain Time. Mountain Time, I think it's 8:30. Is that correct?
Oh, right. Central Standard.
Central Time, right, is 8:30. Yes. Okay.
Oh, you
Thank
are appreciated. Be well.
Oh, a reminder today, 12:45, or 12 o'clock with Rabbi Mendy, 12:45 with myself, learning some amazing Talmudic teachings, and that you can get on Chabad ZK Facebook or on Zoom. For the Zoom address, I just put it up on. I just put it up on Facebook. All right. We'll get back to Neff. I'm sorry I left, but to be continued our conversation. God bless you all. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.